Hi, everybody, and welcome to the call. I have a very special guest tonight. His name is Chef Dell Sroufe. Now, it's spelled Sroufe, and even though I've been friends with him for 5 years, he just told me today that it's pronounced Sroufe, which rhymes with loaf. And all these years, I thought it was pronounced Sroufe, which rhymes with souffle. So I apologize for getting his name wrong for 5 years, but at least we know it tonight. Dell is the executive chef of the Wellness Forum in Columbus, Ohio. He's an amazing chef, culinary instructor, person, and the author of several best-selling cookbooks, including New York Times best-selling cookbooks. And we're going to talk a little bit about many of his books, but I would like to focus mostly on one of his books, which I actually reread last night before going to bed, because it's more of a personal, it tells his story. It's not just recipes. It's called Better Than Vegan, and it's the story of how he lost over 200 pounds. I feel like Dell and I are kindred spirits because when I read his book again last night, one of the things he said is that he became fat. He started getting fat at the age of 6. Myself, it was the age of 5. He was born about a year after me. He was the owner of a vegan bakery, which helped him gain those extra 200 pounds. And I also was the vegan pastry chef, which really was not figure friendly for me either. He is an amazing dancer. I'm an amazing singer. I mean, the comparisons go on and on. Welcome to the call, Chef Dell.
Thank you for having me. What an introduction. Thank you.
You are just, I'm not just saying this because you're my friend. You're such a kind person. You're such a fun person. And I just love the fact that you're not only coming to Healthy Taste of LA, but you're making the dinner, and you can tell everybody what you're making in a minute. You're making the breakfast, and you're going to judge the Iron Chef. Dell and I actually met at an Iron Chef. We were against each other in November of 2010 when I was speaking at the Wellness Forum. I believe the ingredients were something like kale and tofu, if I remember correctly, and we just had a ball, and we get to work together now and then, and we've waited 5 long years for him to come to LA, so we are so excited. We only have a few tickets left, so if you want to see Chef Dell and Dr. McDougall and Dr. Pam Popper, you're going to need to buy your tickets soon at www.healthytasteonline.com. So, Dell, what are you making for the dinner, as long as we mentioned that?
Oh, my goodness. We're going to do an inspired recipe. It's a pot pie shepherd's pie. It's called shepherd's pot pie, but it really is a creamy vegetable base, a.k.a. healthy cream, and a mashed potato crust. So hearty, wholesome, down-home kind of food.
It sounds delicious, and the picture in the Forks Over Knives cookbook looked amazing, and I appreciate what Dell's doing because I asked all the chefs if they could include potatoes in their recipe out of deference to Dr. McDougall, and I can't think of a more delicious way to do that. So thank you so much for doing that. And
you're welcome.
And I love that you get things creamy, not only without oil, without fat. And can we say what one of your secret ingredients is in what you use a lot in Better Than Vegan? It starts with the letter C. Are we allowed to tell?
Oh, yeah, of course. It's cauliflower. I use cauliflower puree, and it is one of my favorite ways to make anything creamy. Mm-hmm. You'll see it in everything from a cream sauce, a bechamel sauce, which is a traditional white sauce, to mayonnaise.
Right.
And it works amazingly well.
And I especially love the oil-free salad dressing recipes and Better Than Vegan, especially the ranch, and how easy it is not only to use the cauliflower, but then you're also not only giving up the fat, but you're increasing the nutrition because you're putting a vegetable in.
And, I started using the cauliflower. I love tofu, but I can't eat very much of it. And so I wanted something that could give me the creaminess that you could get out of a silken tofu without the use of soy. And the recipe originally came from a soup that I make every Christmas for a creamy cauliflower bisque. And I loved it for years. After I took the oil out of it, I still loved it. And one day I thought to myself, oh, my God, this would make a great cream sauce for anything that you'd want to do with it.
It's brilliant, and I'm with you. I'm allergic to soy, so I so appreciate the use of cauliflower in that book. Now, tell me if I'm not mistaken, but one of the photos in the book looks like a present I once gave you, a sign that says, "Many people have eaten my food and gone on to lead normal lives."
That is a present from you, and it's one of my favorite things to read every now and then as I walk by my kitchen or into my kitchen.
Yeah, I love that you included that in the book. So I promise we're going to get to, we have lots of questions about your miraculous weight loss story, but we were chatting with a few people before you got on, and some of them had so many of the same questions, and so I'm going to get to those first to make sure that we get to them. As you had a bakery for many years, a vegan bakery, Dell's Bread, so you know a lot about baking. So we've got some baking questions. Kathy, before you came on, said she tried to make vegan cornbread. It just didn't fly. Barbara asked about how you're substituting the fat in baking, since you're not using oil. And a few people asked, like, well, how do we bake without sugar? Is there a way to convert the sugar to dates or date paste? So I'll let you take it away. Anything you can tell us about vegan baking, we'd appreciate.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let's start with cornbread because I just made cornbread muffins this week for an event, and we were really excited that on day 2 they were still moist. And I heard a little bit of the conversation about cornbread, and it was about applesauce, and that's what we use as well. But I think one thing that people probably don't know is when I make my cornbread, the batter looks almost really too wet. So it's a very, very moist batter to start, and it makes for a moist cornbread. So if your batter's not moist enough, you're going to get what you give. So you end up with a drier, crumblier cornbread otherwise. As far as the sugar, converting sugar to dates is doable. I think the thing to remember about using dates is, even though you're creating this puree, when you take dates, and I have a 2-minute date syrup that we do in my in a couple of the next cookbook and the Better Than Vegan cookbook, and dates, even though it's pureed, it's still part solid. In other words, so you can't take, and sugar kind of is too, but sugar acts like a liquid in baking. So sugar is part of the liquid equation, but dates are part of the solid and the liquid equation. And in baking, it's very scientific like that. So you have to account for both of those things. Right. So when you take out a cup of sugar, you really can't do a cup of date puree and get the same results. You're going to get a little bit heavier results. Mm-hmm. All right, so you've got to keep that in mind with whatever you're doing, and probably adjust your liquid a little bit more liquid when you have a cup of date puree replacing a cup of sugar, and you're probably going to need a little bit more liquid to go along with that as well.
You are so right, and I agree with you, and have been asked this question for years, and sometimes, Dell, I think it's just easier to create a recipe than to try to convert one that already exists.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think also the other thing is to keep it as simple as possible. So if you look at my cornbread recipe, it is cornmeal, whole wheat pastry flour, whatever whole grain flour you're going to use, baking powder, sea salt, applesauce, and almond milk, and then whatever sweetener you're going to use. And that's it. So no chia seeds, no flax seeds. I rarely ever use any of those other kinds of leaveners or binders unless it's a gluten-free recipe or something specific like that.
Right. That would make sense. Now, you'd mentioned some flours. Is it fairly easy, in your opinion, because we do know a lot of people that are either celiacs or gluten or wheat intolerant? Can you substitute flours 1-to-1, or is that a no-no also?
Well, you can, but you've got to keep in mind not every flour is created equal. So, a whole wheat pastry flour has some gluten to it. It's not the same as a whole wheat bread flour, which has more gluten to it. But you've got to account for what gluten's role is in baking. In other words, if you're going to use a gluten-free flour, then you've got to have something that will act as that binder to take the place of the gluten, or you end up with a very crumbly mess. Right. And usually that xanthan gum is one thing that you'll see, or xanthan gum is the one thing that you'll see. And usually a half teaspoon in a recipe is plenty. Right. But the other thing that I often tell people, too, is that think about flour as not like this monolithic kind of thing, but it has several properties. So in addition to being, part protein, it's also part starch. Right. And so you need to usually account for that starch. So sometimes it's tapioca flour or arrowroot flour or whatever it is. So you've got to pay attention to all of those things. And I say when you're starting to do substitutions in baking, if you're not really experienced at it, start simply. Substitute one thing at a time and figure out how that works, and then go on to the next. So when you try and do 5 or 6 things at a time and it's new to you, you're going to struggle.
Right. I think you're so right what you said a few moments ago, that baking really is a science. Like I was talking about to my sister about this today, that when I'm doing a dessert recipe, or especially a baked one, I do follow the recipe to a letter. But when I'm cooking, I feel that cooking is more improvisational and forgiving, and you don't necessarily have to follow it, to the letter. But you're right, baking is a science. Absolutely.
Yeah, you've got to pay attention and respect the alchemy that's going on there in baking. And I agree with cooking. I break the rules every chance I get.
You're so cute. So I was reading in your book and tell me that the only person that ever called you Fatso was your brother Jeffrey. Does he still call you Fatso?
That was my brother Tony, actually, not Jeffrey.
All right, maybe I got the name wrong, but you had 2 brothers. One was named Jeffrey.
I had 2 brothers, and the reason I make that clear is because Jeffrey, my younger brother, also has a weight problem, and is working to take care of his as well. He just lost almost 100 pounds, actually, and he's done smart things like getting rid of the dairy from his diet, cutting back on his animal proteins, and added oils to his diet, even though he's not strictly vegan. He's really made some strong improvements there. But no, my older brother doesn't do that anymore. It took a lot of, bullying is something that happens inside the home and outside the home, and I've just started talking about this more publicly. But I think at some point in my life, I said to him, and you have to say this: I don't need you in my life. You're not nice to me, and I'm ending this relationship unless you can find a different way to relate to me. And he has. He's learned to have a different conversation with me and to respect me because I demanded that respect.
Good for you. Now has Tony remained slim his whole life?
Well, no, and Tony's not very healthy.
Good. I'm sorry to be happy about that, but I was hoping he would get his just desserts for calling you fat. So I was hoping he would, have something.
Tony was 6'4" and 160 pounds until he got married at the age of 27, and he's almost 300 pounds now. It's on his belly, and he really has some serious health issues. And he doesn't eat anything closely. He doesn't eat vegetables. He loves fried foods, and it shows in how he feels. You can see it.
I've always wanted to ask you this, because both of our, your weight loss was way more astounding. I mean, you lost like half your weight. You're not half the man you used to be. And I only lost a third of my weight, but we both did this rather publicly. And I know that just because I was Chef AJ first, and then people saw me lose this, 50 pounds through Facebook and YouTube, I was getting comments before I lost weight like, well, if the vegan diet's so good, why are you so fat? Did you get comments like that, or anything other than having Tony call you fat? So did you get any feedback like that?
I still do, actually, because I still have weight to lose, and I still struggle with my weight, and so it's interesting that I encounter, and this happened actually. You and I have both been to Marshall, Texas, more than once.
Mm-hmm.
I sat across the table from a young man from Canada, a very nice guy, and I don't think he meant any ill will by it. But, the conversation he had with me is like, how can you be on this diet and still, be as big as you are?
Mm-hmm.
And, it was an interesting conversation. And I kind of appreciated it because not too many people, my older brother called me fat, but a lot of my life I think of myself as invisible, but people really sort of look away from you when you're overweight. And so this guy was very honest and had a very honest question, which I appreciated. And I answered him very honestly. I'm like, I struggle with eating the way that anybody does. I've not achieved perfection. I work hard at it every day, and I have my own struggles. Not all of which go around to the food. Food is one part of being healthy, but our perception of food, our perception of eating, and the other dynamics in our lives, like sleeping enough and exercising enough and dealing with stress, and all of those things go into play here, and all of them have to be addressed, and those are all things that I work on every day.
Right. And I think if that guy would have read your book, he would understand that, see, he's meeting you at this point in your journey. He doesn't realize that you've already lost 200 pounds, that you used to weigh 475 pounds. I almost feel like you need to walk around like with a T-shirt, like as your before, so that, you know, people would stop asking that question. And I wonder about that because I mean, what I love about your story, and it mirrors mine too, is because one of the things we both have to offer people is the fact that just being on a vegan diet doesn't guarantee health, and it certainly doesn't guarantee slimness. Tell a little bit about how you actually gained weight on a vegan diet.
Well, and you know, I went vegan in 1997, and I made every mistake possible in starting my own business. And the first mistake I made was giving up all manner of self-care. Mm-hmm. And so my diet disrupted into stress eating and eating what was ever in front of me, which was baked goods and pastries. And, you know, I hate to say it, but there were days when I left work and took home a bag of potato chips and a six-pack of beer, and that was what I ate the rest of the day before I went to bed. And, of course, you know, beer and potato chips can both be vegan, but there's nothing healthy about any of it, right?
Right.
It's certainly not a sustainable diet. So it actually happened really easily. I stopped exercising because I was working 80 to 100 hours a week, and when you're working like that, the only thing that you can do at night is go home and not do anything.
Right.
And it happened in about 3 years I gained that kind of weight. So imagine, you know, for those of you that don't have a weight problem, and for those of you that have never weighed that kind of weight, I want you to go and see if you can find even a 25-pound bag of flour and walk around with that for more than 5 or 10 minutes and see how that feels.
Right. I always tell people in my Ultimate Weight Loss program, just go to Costco and pick up a 10-pound bag of potatoes, but don't put it in your cart. I mean, people don't realize it's such an enormous amount. And you had mentioned the story about injuring your ankle. One of the impetuses for me to finally lose weight was that I was facing knee surgery. And when the doctor said to me, for every pound you're overweight, it's 4 pounds of pressure to your joints, I was like, whoa, you know, I can't imagine what it's like what it must have felt like to your poor knees and ankles at that weight.
Well, I don't know if you've ever seen it, and I walk pretty normally. That ankle never healed, and I tell you, when I fell at 475 pounds. I had a doctor later tell me that I broke a bone in my foot, and it never did heal properly. So my foot is somewhat distorted. It looks like I'm collapsed to the inside of my foot when I walk, and I basically walked around like that with my foot wrapped in gauze for over a year before I even asked for help. But it was mostly because of the amount of weight that I was putting onto it, that when I fell, it was an easy do, you know.
What's amazing to me, Dell, about your story is, other than this ankle injury, you seem to have escaped many, or if not all, of the lifestyle diseases that normally go around.
Well, and I say that in the book. I said I'm probably one of the luckiest guys around to have reached 475 pounds, and I've never even had high blood pressure. Now, I think I was a ticking time bomb, and I say that because if you look at my family, my father, who had 8 brothers and sisters, my father's 88 years old. He's one of 3 remaining of the 9 brothers and sisters. And they all died from some of the diseases that we talk about that are diet-related. All of them did. And they all were relatively healthy until they reached about 60. So my one aunt, Linda, died when she was 62 from cancer. But they all hit 60. And my dad said this. He had never been in a hospital until he was about 60 years old. He was actually living out in L.A. at the time. And he passed out of his desk one day, and he wakes up and he walks himself over to his doctor's office, who checked his blood sugar, and his blood sugar was over 800.
Wow.
They were like, how did you even do that? And I said, Dad, how did you do that? He says, I just did. But the important part of the story is that my dad was not even born in a hospital. He was born in a house and had never been in a hospital until that event happened in his early 60s.
Wow, that's incredible.
So I knew I was a ticking time bomb, and it was going to come one day.
Yeah. So,
my younger brother, by the way, wasn't so lucky. He had testicular cancer in his 30s.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, so it took time for him to finally come around and realize that he was a ticking time bomb, too.
So what was that day like? Did you just literally one day wake up and realize you were fat? Was this a long time? I mean, like what? This is what interests me the most is that when people can make these changes, it's remarkable because you teach a wonderful course that I'm a member of in the Wellness Forum, the permanent weight loss course, and the statistics from the National Weight Loss Registry say that 98% of people that lose weight gain it back within 2 years, something like 66% the first year and 22% the second year. So I know for me, it was just really, I needed to avoid knee surgery. I was deathly afraid of the anesthetic and the procedure. What was the defining moment that one day you just said, I'm sick of this and I'm going to do something about it? How did that happen?
I think it was, I don't think it was as dramatic as you might think. I had been living with this ankle injury. I had been continued working. I was self-employed. I had no insurance, so if I didn't work, I didn't get paid. I left the bakery business and was running a personal chef service out of my house. But I only worked 3 days a week, and a typical day for me used to be that I would get up and work for a few hours, and then I'd go lay down and rest for an hour, and that's how my days were, just to get through the days at 475 pounds. But I remember one day I'd already started doing some product development and work with the Wellness Forum, and I remember one night I walked into the Wellness Forum, and Dr. Popper was sitting there, and one of the other facilitators were sitting there, and I sat down to them, and I just said, I need some help. And it was as simple as that. So I don't know if it was like just realizing that nothing was going to change unless I got help, because I'm not the kind of person who really asks for help. Mm-hmm. It was something that comes easy for me, but it was something that I think that I knew that I had to do because what I was doing wasn't doing well for me. The fatigue, the pain and discomfort were just at a point where it wasn't a dramatic thing. It was just like, okay, this isn't working. I guess I got to try something differently.
That's right. There's an old saying: if you always do what you've always done, you always get what you've always gotten. Now, you mentioned Dr. Pam Popper, and you mentioned the Wellness Forum. And just in case somebody's listening who isn't familiar with Dr. Pam Popper, who's going to be our guest next week, and the Wellness Forum, could you just tell the listeners what that is?
The Wellness Forum's been around for 18 years, and it's kind of amazing if you think about how for a lot of us in the world, the whole foods plant-based diet's just become a part of our consciousness in the past 5 or 4 or 3 or some even 2 years or less. Mm-hmm. But the Wellness Forum's been around for over 18 years, and it's kind of cool that they'll both be in LA at the same time because John McDougall is Dr. Popper's mentor. She read his book first, and that inspired her to start the company that she started. But we basically teach people how to take control of their health using not just a whole foods plant-based diet, but learning how to exercise and get adequate hydration and to deal with the medical system in which we all have to live. So, what tests do we get and what tests do we not get? How do I manage weight loss when I've tried every diet possible and nothing's working? And we know that weight loss isn't just about eating more broccoli and rice. It's about changing the way that you look at food and perceive food. So we have those kinds of programs. We have a school, and I'll let Dr. Popper talk more about it, but basically our basic goal for our members is to put them through our Wellness 101 course, a 10-hour course that teaches you how to change your diet, change your lifestyle to achieve optimal health, to prevent and reverse disease. And it's an amazing program. It really, really is. I love the fact that I get to be a part of it. That I tell you honestly, I never thought I saw myself in this kind of a career doing what I do.
And you're so great doing it. While I've never taken the class you just mentioned, I can vouch for the fact that you guys have amazing classes, and I'm in 2 of them right now. One of them's a business course. One is your permanent weight loss course. And what's great about it is you don't have to go to school. You can do it from the privacy of your own home or your car, and it involves calls, and it's just wonderful. And I really recommend people look up the Wellness Forum. What is the website if they don't know it?
It's wellnessforum.com, FORUM.com. And by the way, we have members in over 39 countries. It really reaches out to people all over the place. And our members are healthy and sick, and they have every kind of disease you've ever heard of. And I've watched many of them walk in the door sick and walk out one day much healthier people. So it's an amazing thing to watch and see every day.
That's great. There's a saying behind every great man is a great woman, and I'm thinking how like there's Dr. Esselstyn and his wife Ann creates all the delicious recipes, and there's Dr. McDougall and Mary creates all the delicious recipes, and now Dr. Popper, with that, you guys are a great team because you really are. It's a great marriage, you two, because she tells you why and you show them how.
Yeah, I and she tells me I'm the more popular of the two because she gets to tell people that they have to change their lives, and I get to show them that it tastes good.
Well, and the food does taste good. If you are listening, you can buy this food wherever you are. You even ship like overseas to to soldiers and stuff, right? Because a lot of your stuff is.
Well, we can ship anywhere, and we ship our frozen foods, our prepared foods across the country, but we also have in-the-bag mixes of convenient foods that make this easy for people that taste good. So soup mixes, and we have a granola and multigrain cereals and things like that really help people just to do this. So if you don't cook,
right.
You don't have to cook. It's up to you.
Because you have like a millet loaf, you have a cheese sauce, and all you have to do, so it's even great, even people that do cook, let's say like they're going camping or something, these would be great things to take with, your prepared foods. And if you live nearby and you can buy the food from the deli case, oh my God, your peanut noodles, everything. I have had the privilege of eating at Dr. Popper's house twice, and of course Dell did the cooking, and you make, and tell me if this is in one of your books, you make a pizza, and I can't have gluten, so I was so thrilled to eat a pizza with a polenta crust, thinly sliced potatoes, caramelized onions, and pesto. Is that in any of your books?
Yeah, that's in the Forks Over Knives, the cookbook. It's a popular recipe. It's one of Brian Rendell's favorite recipes. He's the founder of Forks Over Knives, and so I make it a lot when people come in. And I think it's actually in the it might be on the Forks Over Knives app now. If you can go to the App Store and download that, it's a good one. Anything with pesto. I said this today. Anything with pesto makes me happy. So.
That's right. Well, how did you get involved? How did your association with Forks Over Knives begin? Because tell me if I have all your books right. You were the primary author on the first Forks Over Knives cookbook, which was definitely a bestseller. You are the primary author on this new one that Pull Day and Letterman wrote. They're going to be interviewed in 2 weeks. You wrote the recipes for Better Than Vegan. You wrote the recipes for Food Over Medicine. And I believe you're writing a 5th book now, something to do with the China study.
I'm writing the next China Study cookbook. It's called the China Study Quick and Easy Cookbook. It'll be out next May. The theme of it is to cook once and eat all week. So it shows people that you don't have to slave in the kitchen to have good food on the table. And so I have a couple of menu plans that show you if you want to spend 4 hours in the kitchen on a Sunday or a Monday or whenever, that you can cook for the whole week and make it easy and still taste good. So that'll be out next May. So I'm very excited about that one.
So first of all, 2 questions. How do you have a full-time job as the executive chef of Wellness Forum, teaching the classes, making all the food? Number 1, how do you have time to write these cookbooks? Number 2, when Process came out 4 years ago, I have 109 recipes in that book, and that was a culmination of 10 years of teaching. I can't write anymore. Where do you get the inspiration to write? Like, what are you up to, like 600 recipes now? How are you doing it?
600 recipes. Well, I think I have you beat on the time frame. I started cooking in vegetarian restaurants in 1989. Mm-hmm. So I've been in the kitchen for about 25 years, and so I guess I've seen my share of inspiration in cookbooks. But I told Brian Wendell this recently when I saw him. I said, if I write any more recipes for you, I have to find some new inspiration because I used up all the ideas that I've had.
Yeah. And how did your association with Forks Over Knives and China Study start? Was it all at the same time?
Dr. Popper was out at I forget the name of a health expo or something out there in L.A. and she was out speaking, and Dr. Campbell was there speaking, and Brian Wendell actually was there to talk to Dr. Campbell about making a movie about the China Study, because Brian had read the China Study and was completely inspired by it, and it completely changed his diet and his life, and he decided that he wanted to share this with the rest of the world, and he wanted to talk to Dr. Campbell about doing this. Well, he heard Dr. Popper speak, and if any of you have ever heard her speak, she's an amazing speaker and a super smart person.
Yep.
And he decided that he needed to have her in the movie and be a part of this. So the film crew shows up in Columbus one day during the making of the movie, and I fed them. Like the course of the 2 or 3 days that they were there, Brian fell in love with the food, and they asked me to contribute 7 recipes when the first book came out. They asked me to do the final food scene in the movie to prepare that food. And then one day I get this call, and it's really funny, I'll keep it quick, but one day I get this call from Brian. They decided they wanted to write this cookbook to show that you could eat this way 365 days of a year. We want to do 365 recipes.
Wow.
And I was, oh, great. Well, I've given 7 recipes to the first one, so maybe they'll ask me for 10 recipes this time, and I'll contribute. And he says, yeah, we'll get back to you. So he comes back to me a few days later. He's got, we've got 2 or 3 other people that want to do this, but we want you to be the lead author. And I'm like, okay, not thinking about what that meant. And he says, well, we need you to contribute about 300 recipes. And I said, okay.
Wow.
And he says, in 90 days.
Oh, my gosh. That must
I wrote the manuscript for Forks Over Knives, the cookbook, in 90 days. I basically got up at 6 o'clock in the morning
I was going to say,
and worked until 11 o'clock at night.
Wow, that's amazing. When you think about it, when you owned the Dell's bread, you would have been much simpler because you were just eating from 4 food groups then: scones, beer, chips, and fries.
Right. Yeah. Now I had to, of course, the exciting thing about all of that is that I still say this, that writing Forks Over Knives probably helped me to realize what a blessing that the food in my life is, because there's 330 recipes in there. And there's every type of cuisine in the world practically. There's all kinds of ethnicities related in there. There's simple food and there's somewhat gourmet food. It goes across the spectrum, but it's all good.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's exciting. And it's I feel like the food itself inspired me more than I was inspired by some thing about cooking or whatever. It's the ingredients that made it possible to make a really good cookbook that are out there in the plant-based world.
Now, I know that I ask this to a lot of chefs, and they say, oh, I can't say. It's like asking me which is my favorite child. But is there a recipe of these more than 600s that's either not necessarily your favorite, but like the one that maybe you're most proud of that you created?
Yeah, there is, and I use this recipe in catering a lot, but there's a spinach and sweet potato lasagna in Knives, the cookbook, made with that cauliflower puree is made into a spinach cream sauce, and it's absolutely one of my favorite recipes ever.
It sounds amazing.
Every time I eat it, I'm a happy guy. So I love that one. I really do. And then in Better Than Vegan, another one that I love, and getting ready to do it. I'm going to be at the Boston Vegetarian Festival Saturday, and I'm going to Portland, Maine, Whole Foods the following Tuesday, and I'm making my smoky black bean bisque from Better Than Vegan, and it's one of my favorite recipes. It's a creamy puree. It's an easy soup to make. It has tons of flavor, and you can eat it as a soup, but half the time end up eating it over a plain baked potato.
Right.
So I love recipes like that are adaptable, and that cauliflower puree we talk about is a recipe that you can do in 1,000 different ways, and so recipes like that make me very, very happy, because I get bored easily, and I want some inspiration and something new.
Sure, I believe you made the smoky bisque in Marshall last year. Am I not mistaken?
Oh yeah, I did. You're right.
You made beef soups.
It must be a favorite of mine because I make it a lot.
Well, you made that. You made the corn chowder. Yeah, your soups are absolutely amazing. So, are you self-taught as a chef? Did you go to culinary school? Have you been cooking?
I am self-taught. I've been cooking, like I said in the book. I've been cooking since I was 8 years old, and I was lucky enough. The first job that I got, I worked with some really good chefs at King Avenue Coffee House, the first vegetarian restaurant I worked at, and I was lucky enough that they gave me the freedom to help out in the kitchen, and then to be in the kitchen and to make mistakes in the kitchen, and to learn from others and learn from my own mistakes and such. In the 8.5 years that I was there, I wasn't even vegetarian when I went to work there.
Wow.
I went to work to try and get some management experience, and 8.5 years later, I'm vegan and opening up a vegan bakery from recipes that I had to develop because I didn't like any of them that I was finding in cookbooks. So I created my own recipes when I started my bakery.
Well, I've got to say, you really do have a gift. You really do. It's just impressive, not just the breadth, but the depth of your recipes and the deliciousness. Now, I could talk all hour about food. It's one of my favorite topics, but we do have some more personal questions regarding your weight loss from listeners, so I'm going to ask you them now. The first one is, okay. What are this is a good one from Amanda. What are some of the habits that have been the key to your success, and how did you develop those habits?
I really did work with the Wellness Farm, and having Dr. Popper as a mentor has really helped a lot. And she really instills in me good habits. One of my bad habits is actually not overeating, but not eating. And starvation diets have been almost my rule, and it's one of the reasons why I still struggle with weight, because my metabolism goes into this starvation mode so easily because I have a bad habit of not eating. So one of my really good habits, and the one that we teach in our weight loss, is eating on a schedule. So eating 6 meals a day, eating on a schedule to, one, fuel the metabolism, to keep the blood sugar regulated, and to help stave off that extreme hunger that can happen for people like me. So it's a very good habit. Drinking water is another one. You've got to stay hydrated. Water does everything good for you, including helping to flush the system. So it's an important part of it. And it, too, you don't get enough water, the body still has a different kind of starvation mechanism that it goes into, and you're going to be stuck. So those are two of my big ones.
Good. They're great. And then I love it. Laurel wants to know if you have a lot of loose skin now, and did you have surgery to tighten it? And if so, how was the surgery?
I am really lucky I don't. So I don't know if it's the hydration or the exercise. You know, I work out with a trainer 4 days a week, and I've been really, really lucky that I haven't had the loose skin problem that I've met several other people that have. So I would certainly have the surgery if I did, but it looks like I'm going to get away without it.
Good, great. Shada wants to know if while you were losing these 200 and some pounds, did your weight plateau at any point, and if so, what did you do about it?
Oh yeah, it plateaus a lot, and matter of fact, I think I've been on a 2-year plateau even recently, and you go back to the basics of what you have to do. So you've got to stick to the rules. You've got to sort of change up. You know, if you're stuck in a rut, one of the things I do is I change my diet up. In other words, I change up what foods I'm eating. So you know, if you eat the same 6 meals every day, and then you do the same kind of exercise every day, it's easy to hit that plateau. So plateaus happen for another reason. A plateau, in some way, for me, is not really a plateau as much as it is eating some of the wrong foods, and that happens too. You know, living in the real world, what happens for people like me is I go to the family gathering at Thanksgiving, and no, I don't eat that food, but I take maybe my own unhealthy but vegan foods with me. And you know, and you've talked about this a lot. You start craving some of those foods, and then they become a part of your psyche, and then you want them again and again and again. So we talk about having something once and putting it away, and sometimes it's easier said than done. So sometimes it's about going through, if I get really caught, I'll go and I'll start looking at a food journal and paying attention to what exactly I've been eating, how I've been eating, and make sure that I'm really on track, or if I'm just fooling myself in my brain. Sometimes we tell ourselves stories that aren't necessarily true.
You know, I agree with you. One of the people I work with a lot is named John Pierre, and he always has a saying, are you fueling yourself or are you fooling yourself? And I agree that keeping a food journal is one of the best tools, and you know, can be as cheap as a notebook from the 99-cent store or a free app, but really, because you're accountable. And I think what happens is a lot of people think they're eating healthy, but they actually underreport what they eat, or maybe they forget a few things. So I think that journal thing is really a great tip. It's a great tip.
Well, you know, a really good thing I do that helps me once I've realized that I might be off track is I keep my house very well sanitized. So one of my favorite foods that I would eat every day is peanut butter, and it could be peanut butter on a spoon, or it could be peanut butter on whole wheat bread.
I love peanut butter.
I catch myself eating 2 or 3 of those a day, so I don't have peanut butter in my house anymore.
Right. I had to break up with peanut butter because he was just, he was just very abusive to me. It
is an abusive relationship, but you know, it's a great lover, that peanut butter. I adore it. I would eat it over anything else on the planet, but I can't have it in my house.
You know what? I think you and me were twins, separated at birth. You know, 2 weeks ago, Howard Lyman said it was harder for him to give up cheese than smoking. It was harder for me to give up peanut butter than chocolate. Peanut butter, I swear, it's an aphrodisiac. It's just wow. We've got the same brain. So Jimmy wants to know if Pam Popper has been an influence on you, and how so.
Well, you know, sometimes the company you keep really sort of determines the habits that you keep, and I say that with Pam Popper is all truth. You know, I have friends that I love with all of my heart, but they don't help me to stay on track when I'm with them.
Mm-hmm.
The friends that are like, oh, you can have just one cookie, or come on, one more beer, or come on, let's go get a pizza tonight. Yeah, we'll get vegan, blah blah blah. And Dr. Popper is someone, you know, we're very good friends. We've been friends for some years now, and she lives this way. So having accomplices, people that share your values and goals, really helps keep you on track.
Yep.
And she and I keep each other accountable. You know, I'm very honest with her. When I'm off track, we talk about it.
Wow.
You know, because we know that it's more than just about the fact that I'm not eating enough broccoli or whatever. We know that there's an emotional side to it, and having someone to share that with really sort of resets the whole thing. It gets me back on track just to know that there's somebody else out there that I can talk to.
Oh, that emotional side seems to derail so many people. Next year, I'm going to be having Dr. Roger Gould on the show. He wrote the book Shrink Yourself, because so many people deal with, you know, the emotional eating, the binge eating, the overeating, you know, the food addiction. That really is tough. You know, I hear you, bro, about that. Gail wants to know, who was your biggest supporter of your life change and why?
I definitely put Dr. Popper up there. I hate to keep coming back to her, but
she's amazing.
She's amazing, but she's the one that, you know, I never paid for my membership at the Wellness Forum. I can call her at 2 o'clock in the morning if I have to. You know, she started training me and getting me into the gym when I could barely stand on my foot, and found ways to work around my injury. She got me doing hot yoga when I was just embarrassed to be seen in public, let alone with just a T-shirt and shorts on, and helped me feel comfortable about myself. And she's the one that reminds me that you know, this is hard, and that, you know, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to make progress.
Right.
You know.
Yep.
I give her a lot of credit.
And I want people to realize it is hard, but it is doable. And if it was easy, everyone would have done it already.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to remember is this is about sustainability. So I'm going to work on this the rest of my life, and I think she reminds me of that too. She's like, you know, giving up is not an option.
Right.
You know, this is not something that you're just not going to do one day. You're going to do this the rest of your life. So learn to embrace and love exercise. Learn to embrace and love drinking water, a lot of water every day, and learn to embrace eating healthy foods. You know, learn to do those things, and it gets a lot easier. And she's right.
It really does. They become habits. You know, I don't think I necessarily love exercise, but I do it mainly because it's on my calendar, and I always follow my calendar, and it says that tomorrow I'm going spinning at 9, and I always do what's in the book. So, like, you know, I don't necessarily love it, but I do it. You know, that's what grown-ups do.
Yeah, that's what grown-ups do, exactly.
Yeah, that's neat. Patty wants to know, how does it feel now walking around in the body that's 200 pounds less? You know, and how does it feel now when you look in a mirror as opposed to when you weighed 475 pounds?
Well, I'll answer the second part first because I think it's a telling tale. And Dr. Popper and I talk about this a lot. That I remember when I weighed 200 pounds when I was younger, I still saw a fat person in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a product of bullying and the self-perception that you learn to have about yourself. So I still see a fat person in the mirror, even though I know that I look much differently than I did at 475 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
But the exciting thing is that, you know, I work out with a trainer 4 days a week. I've started boxing. I've actually started running a little bit so that I can get out and do a little bit harder exercise. I'm much stronger than I was even 2 years ago with my new trainer. And so I'm able to do things that I haven't been able to do, and there's something liberating about that, and something very exciting about possibilities when you're able to really get out and embrace being active and doing things.
Well, what I love about you is you are doing it. And, you know, you see so many of these authors on television and Dr. Oz and with these best-selling books. They're selling weight loss books, but they themselves have never had to lose weight. Or they're selling weight loss books and they're still quite overweight, but you're actually doing it. And you know what I'm saying? And so I respect you and your journey because you've done it and you're doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I hope that my story becomes inspirational not because I've achieved perfection, which I haven't, but because there is a journey that's there and that's ongoing.
Right.
I think that's the biggest story to tell people in all of this, is that your journey is the rest of your life.
Right. Well, but
so one day it won't be about me thinking about weight loss, but it's about the fact that I want to be an active and capable 90-year-old.
Right.
It's just changing the perception of the story a little bit, but the story is going to be the same.
Yeah. I think the fact that you're so not just so kind but so relatable, and do you think that culturally it's more difficult to be overweight as a woman or a man, or it really just doesn't matter?
I think that women are beaten up a lot more than men are for the way they look, for a lot of things, and it's an embarrassing part of our culture that I watched one of my favorite actors the other day who has a husband who's an actor, and they were at home comparing stories one night, and she was talking about the fact that the interviewer was asking her what it was like to be a mother and an actor, what it was like to raise a family and to have a profession, but no one's ever asked her husband that. So women have different standards that they're held up to than men do, and women are shamed a lot more and bullied a lot more for being imperfect, and it's embarrassing to me that we treat women the way that we do. Having said that, men suffer from some of the same emotional scars that women do. So I was bullied, and I deal with that every day still. Though I think I'm a survivor and thriving in my life, but I've met plenty of men who have emotional scars from their lives and from the way they've been treated in this world. But I just think it's much more obvious with women and much more visible.
Yeah, I mean, I just think of you because you're 6'3", and I just think you could just deck anybody that tries to bully you.
Yeah, but when you're bullied from the time that you're born, when it's happening in your own house,
right.
You assume this position of powerlessness until you realize you're not.
Sure.
My father never even knew that I was bullied, and my father was a boxer. And I think that if I had come to him and said, this is happening to me, it had been a very different day because he wouldn't have allowed me to tolerate it.
Sure.
But because I did what a lot of people do, is you keep these things secret.
Sure.
Then it's allowed to perpetuate and be perpetuated. Bullies count on that. You're not going to tell others about what's happening to you.
Right, because if you do, they'll lose their power. I sent another book here in the works that doesn't have anything to do with recipes.
We may see. You never know.
I really do. So Judy wants to know what any health issues have improved since you started eating this way. We heard that your ankles, slowly improving. Anything else?
Yeah, my knees are doing a lot better. Again, I'm able to start running a little bit, so my joints are definitely feeling the less pressure. And like I said, I still have, I'd like to lose another 50 or 60 pounds, but I can tell the difference. I'm a lot stronger. I have a lot more energy. I have less sleep apnea, I'm told, so I'm not snoring as badly at night, and I don't wake myself up not breathing like I used to. I have less acid reflux. That's gone. That's a great thing because I just don't eat those foods that cause that, and the gut has healed. I have less digestive issues, and that's really nice. So like I said, I've been lucky. No high blood pressure. I was never diagnosed with diabetes or anything like that. So knock on wood that continues to be the case.
That is fantastic. Shada wants to know a little bit about the time frame of your weight loss journey. For example, like you lost these 200 pounds, you still want to lose 50. Did you lose a lot of it very quickly? Did it slow down? Are you going to tweak it at all to lose these last 50? So tell us a little bit about how the time went with this.
Yeah, the first 200 came off in probably 3 or 4 years, so slow and steady.
Right.
And then it's been going slower ever since. So we were talking about this today. I was telling Pam, I said, I look at my journal. I eat perfectly some weeks, and I might lose a half a pound.
Mm-hmm.
But and the problem is that I can gain 2 pounds much easier than I can lose it.
Yeah.
So I almost never really am allowed to stray, which is hard to do living in the real world.
Sure.
So it a lot more slowly. So what we're doing is I continue with my workouts. My trainer and I spend more time talking about this with my trainer than I do with a dietitian or nutritionist, is working to increase muscle mass, to increase the cardiovascular capacity so that, I can burn more calories and burn more fuel efficiently. And, muscle burns more calories than fat, and just sort of changing the dynamics of my body. And it's starting to, I've lost 10 pounds this year. So it's been slow, but it's been steady. I've changed. There's a lot more muscle mass than there used to be, and that's exciting. I've got great legs. If you ever see me in the shorts, they look a lot better than they ever did.
We hope to see them at Healthy Taste. I agree with you.
We'll see.
Slow and steady really does win the race. People have to understand they didn't put this weight on overnight, and they can't realistically expect to lose it overnight. But isn't it interesting, though, like you had just mentioned, it's just like with money. It's so much easier to spend it than it is to save it, and it's so much easier to gain weight than it is to lose it,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I'm really trying. Like my dad used to tell me this. He says, "You want results immediately. You've always been that way. And you've got to unlearn that." And I'm trying to learn that this is a marathon. It's not a sprint, and then it's going to take as long as it takes.
I love that. Say that again, guys. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Perfect.
Not a sprint.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, a few more cooking questions we have from Sheila. She'd like to know your suggestions on how to cook for only one person. Are there certain ingredients that you always keep on hand?
Yeah, and I have in my, I think both in the China Study Quick and Easy and in Better Than Vegan, I kind of or actually in even the Forks Over Knives cookbook, there's a Chinese brown sauce. But I always have some sort of stir-fry sauce on hand. And so I'm always eating, like, I do a 10-minute dinner. And I eat a lot of stir-fry because I like fresh vegetables and want to have those around, and I love brown rice or quinoa or whatever. But I keep cooked brown rice on hand. I have my stir-fry sauce on hand so that I'll chop up an onion and throw it into a really hot skillet, and I'll add in some fresh vegetables, and then throw in my stir-fry sauce, a tablespoon or two, and then my and some brown rice, and I have dinner.
Yeah, I love it, and I love rice. Rice makes everything a meal, for me. Anything over rice or a potato.
Yeah, and I sometimes will have just like 4 or 5 baked potatoes that I'll throw into the oven for the week, and then I can come home and have those with whatever.
Right.
So sometimes it's salsa, sometimes it's chili or soup that I'll bring home from work or whatever. But just having those things available makes life easier.
I agree. I do that same thing. Always got a potato ready with some of the non-dairy cheese sauce or salsa or whatever. Yep. Boy, we're like two peas in a pod. Nick has a question about salt. He says there is a SOS, which means sugar, oil, salt-free community, and there's the wellness form, which, as far as I know, does not restrict salt. What are your thoughts on salt?
Well, the one thing that you learn eating this kind of diet, because I eat a lot more fresh foods than I used to, so I don't put salt on fruit, for example. Mm-hmm. And I eat a lot of salads, and I don't eat a lot of salad dressing, so sometimes my salads are just lemon juice and maybe a pinch of salt and some pepper. But what you find that and I think Dr. The True North guy.
Goldhammer. He was on about a month ago.
I've heard him say this. There's 3 levels of salt consumption. So if you're the McDonald's eating the standard American diet, you're eating an insane amount of salt every day. And then for someone like me who cooks and applies salt, so when I cook with salt, I don't add it on at every level. I add it on towards the end of the cooking.
Right.
And I don't restrict it, but I also don't, I don't have to add it to every touch of things. And then I eat sometimes a plain baked potato. I'm just eating without salt or anything. I just eat it. But because I'm eating a lot more fresh vegetables and fresh fruits and things like that, my salt consumption is a lot lower than it used to be.
Yep. Cool.
Now, I think that there are people out there that probably do have to salt restrict. Mm-hmm. And, I know that I don't like to eat a lot of salty food just because I've gotten away from it. But, I think everybody has to make that decision for themselves, and people come from very different places. I've been lucky enough. Like I said, I've never had high blood pressure, so it's never been an issue for me.
Excellent. Well, cool. Thank you. let's see, I don't know who asked this question, but they wanted to know if you could share your top 3 favorite lunch or dinner recipes with us. You don't have to, just say what they are and where to find them.
I've eaten hummus most of my 25 years. I can't tell you how many gallons of hummus I made. I have fat-free hummus in the refrigerator right now. I eat it sometimes with veggies, sometimes on a whole grain bread. Sometimes this is a weird thing, but it's one of my things, is I take vegetables out of the freezer and throw them in a pan and cook them, and then I'll add some hummus into that to make a kind of an instant sauce, and it's pretty darn tasty.
It sounds good, actually.
So hummus is one. I love to have a multigrain cereal. We make our own at the Wellness Farm that we sell, so a multigrain cereal is an oil-free, very low-sugar cereal. I like oatmeal. Oatmeal is a standard for me that I eat sometimes for dinner.
Right. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. Sharon wants to know, what is your best tip for adding flavor to healthy plant-based dishes so that people eating the standard American diet can enjoy them?
Well, I think, one of the things that we learn is when you would change from eating the standard American diet to eating this diet, your taste buds have to change, and we call that down-regulating. And it happens with time. So if you're used to putting butter on a plain baked potato, you need to go cold turkey and get rid of the butter.
Right.
And then what you find is 2 or 3 weeks down the road, you're not even going to miss it and notice it was there. You'll also find that you taste foods differently. And I think you need to allow that to happen for yourself. And I know it's a good reason probably to give up salt for a period of time. And I think it's not, because you can learn that a baked potato has its own flavor components that are pretty amazing when they're not drowned in salt.
Yep.
But there are other ways to add flavor. I use a lot of fresh and dried herbs. I have probably 20 different spices and herbs in my pantry. I have a garden, and I have fresh herbs growing there: basil, cilantro, parsley, sage, thyme, etc. I use them in almost everything. And I love, of course, garlic. I think life is not worth living without garlic. But, there are plenty of ways to add flavor to foods that don't include fat and meat broth. There's a lot of options out there, and I think it's just a matter of exploring those that you like.
Do you have a favorite herb or spice? Mine happens to be smoked paprika.
Oh, okay. I like smoked paprika, but I think mine is probably basil.
Basil, okay.
Basil and cilantro. Yeah, I think I could eat either of those anytime.
Well, because you love pesto, and basil and garlic equals pesto, and you can put that on a baked potato.
On a baked potato, baby, that's right.
Well, this has been the first time we've actually gotten through all the questions. So now I have a question pertaining to the Iron Chef that's happening at Healthy Taste of LA. Actually, 2 questions on Sunday, November 2nd. You're going to be one of the judges along with Dr. Popper and Mary McDougall. And the competitors are Chef Ramses Bravo and Chef Eric LeChasseur. They'll have 20 minutes for each round. There's going to be a savory round and a sweet round. I don't know how well you know either of these fine chefs, but you got any feelings? You got any predictions on who's going to take it or which round? And any.
Well, I know Eric. I don't. Wait a minute. What's Eric's last name?
LeChasseur. He has a restaurant in Venice called Seed Kitchen. He's chef for Madonna and Gwyneth Paltrow.
Oh my God.
And he's just a classically trained, I believe, Johnston in Wales, or maybe somewhere in France. He's French, and he's a classically trained chef. And then we have Ramses Bravo, who's also classically trained, who now is the executive chef of True North Health. I know where I think it's going, but I was just wondering what your thoughts were about this.
Yeah, I think I've heard of Eric LeChasseur, but I want to give it to Ramses because I think that he's lived this realm. He's got to be a very creative guy working at True North and doing this SOS thing. So I think you really become creative when you live that world.
Right. I was thinking, and my hope is that one wins one round and one wins the other round, because that would just make my heart melt. Now, here's the last question.
I agree.
Yeah. Although you're not competing this time, who knows? One chef may not show up and you may have to. But I asked this to Ramses. I'm going to ask it with you with 3 different ingredients. Just pretend right now you're in an Iron Chef. And I have given these 3 ingredients. What are you going to make? Because you come home, this is all that's in your pantry. Cannellini beans, sweet potato, and kale. Go. What are you going to make?
Oh, wow. I think I'm going to make a cannellini bean stew with sweet potatoes and kale. That'll be an easy one.
Well, okay, good. Next time I'll do something harder. You have been the most delightful, engaging guest. I've learned so much talking to you, and I'm sure everybody feels the same way, and those that are listening on the replay are going to feel the same way. It was absolutely delightful talking to you. You're just a remarkable, wonderful human being. You inspire me. Your books are amazing. Your food is amazing, and you're just really, just like I said, a teddy bear, figuratively and literally. I love to hug you. You're a great dancer, and I am so looking forward to seeing you at Healthy Taste of LA. And if you guys aren't coming, you are missing one of the finest plant-based chefs and one of the finest dining experiences of all. It's Chef Dell Sroufe, which rhymes with loaf. Thank you so much for doing this call with us. And you still there?
Thank you so much. I love you, and I love what you do, and I really look forward to spending a little bit of time with you. It never happens enough for me.
I know. I can't wait. We'll see each other in Marshall, Texas. And for those of you listening to the call, I'm Chef AJ from www.eatunprocessed.com. Next week, we'll be talking to Dr. Pam Popper. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, I'm Chef AJ, and I make healthy taste delicious. Good night, everyone.